Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are painting the Molten Infernoth, which is one of the invocations of the Fire Slayers from Age of Sigmar. And here on screen is a list of all the colors I used on this guy. This is using the Paint Schemer tool that my club has developed for saving paint schemes. You are able to use it completely for free, and it is linked down in the description below if you'd like to. But for this project, I wanted to try to paint this guy as if he had blue flame instead of the traditional orange, red, yellow flame. And I'm not really convinced that I was successful at getting blue flame across. To be honest, it kind of looks more like ice or water than blue flame. But I figured I would post this video anyway. Maybe some people will find it helpful. I think the final result looks cool, regardless of whether or not it really achieved what I was going for. But regardless, I'll get all the paints together and we'll get started. Alright, so first of all, I primed this guy with just some white spray paint. And I'm starting off here with Aquamarine from the Army Painter Fanatic line. And I'm just going to cover the entirety of the Magmadroth, not Magmadroth, whatever this guy's called, Infernoth with this color. When painting this guy, you really have to make sure to work your colors in because he has all this raised detail and texture. And if you aren't careful, your paint will just sit on the top bits and won't go into the recesses. And then you'll have your primer sticking out there and it won't look good. And especially since this is going to be the base coat for my flame color, it really needs to be worked in there completely. Not really much else to say with this step. We're just base coating in blue. I will finish this one up and we'll come back and do the next step. Alright, so continuing on to our next color here, which is Marine Mist, again from the Army Painter Fanatic line. I'm just going to go in here and, well, first realize that my brush is a little bit too wet. But then I'm going to go in and just stab in this color in the recesses around this miniature. And that's just to get some idea of not a consistent color under the rock that we're going to paint on this guy. We want it to appear like, as fire would, that it has multiple temperature zones and different colors. Again, I'm not sure I really made this effect look correct. I think one of the biggest things I could have done to get the blue fire look is to transition to yellow before, have a little bit of yellow in the edges, and then move into blue to show that it's supposed to be fire and not some water-based something. But nonetheless, I'm just stippling this in, making sure to get in the recesses, randomly scattered around the miniature. And then I also, as you saw, I got in the mouth there because I figured the inside is going to be the hottest part of him. And then I just worked my way all the way around this miniature until I decided there were enough of these lighter color splotches. Alright, so now we are back for the third step, and that is to do some matte white, again from the Army Painter Fanatic line. Exactly how we did the lighter blue a second ago, but now we're going to focus on the area in the middle of all those light blue splotches. Again, just to show some different temperature locations, and I want the centers of these hotter zones to be that bright white. So just like the last one, I just did this all over the miniature, making sure to get the center of each of those light blue sections, let that dry, and then we'll come back and do the next step. Alright, we are back, and now we're going into some bootstrap brown. Again, keeping with the theme from the Army Painter Fanatic line. And this was the most time-consuming part of this whole project. And this is where I just go in and paint all the bits of rock that are on this guy. Being careful to not get any on the recesses where the blue and the white are. And it's just a long process. You just have to go through one by one and get them all painted. There isn't really a ton to talk about here. It's just being methodical and going through and making sure you catch everything that needs to be brown. Around his shoulders and arms can get a little tricky because it's not as segmented as his chest and his back are. So you just have to kind of take your best guess what is rock and what is the fire parts. Uh, as you'll see in the final product, I kind of just guessed, and I think it came out fine. But there's probably a bunch of different ways you could do the shoulders. This was just my way. All right, so the next step is to use some of this Andrea color gray number 3. Unfortunately, I don't know what this color is called because the label has worn off, but I'm painting rocks with gray. Nothing new here. You can use any gray you want. I just happened to have this already on the paint desk and I liked how it looked. So I decided to use that. But, any medium gray or any color that you want your rocks to be honest, will work just fine here. You want purple rocks, you can use purple. Rocks are the kind of thing that can really be any color you want them to be. So there aren't very many. They're just scattered around on the dirt that he's kind of broken through here. So I just went through and painted all those with some gray. Let that dry, and then we'll come back and do the next step. All right, we are back, and we're moving on to Carnelian Skin now. Again, from the Army Painter Fanatic line. And for this, I'm going to overbrush this onto the brown that's already present on the model. This is just to break up the monotone brown color, give it a little bit of color variation, just like we did with the fire. And then we'll do this with one more color after this. Probably my most common feature in my painting is when I want to change the color of something or enhance the color of something, I'll just do one up and one down. So one color that's darker, add that to it. One color that's lighter, add that to it. Call it a day. I'll actually have a video coming up. I'm not sure if it'll be this Saturday or maybe the one after, about that one up, one down method. And it's kind of a fairly obvious thing, but for beginners it may not be, and maybe even for some more advanced painters it might not be. Just the idea that to enhance a color, you take a darker color, you take a lighter color, you add those to it, and pretty much you're good to go. So this is not quite as meticulous as the previous brown step, but you still have to go through and be careful getting it all over the little flecks of brown here. And then around the head and chest and shoulders, I did it a little more heavy. It was more of a true like layering on as opposed to an overbrush. Just to bring some more like exaggeration or accentuation, I guess, to that area of him. But yeah, once this is all dry, we'll come back and do the next step. All right, and now we're moving on to some Paratrooper Tan, and this is the one up step of the one up, one down. And we're just going to do more of a true dry brush with this, just on the edges of all these back scales. And then I even put some of it on the flatter areas of the brown also, just to give it, again, some color variation. I don't go too crazy with this, though, because it is a pretty light color compared to the other two, and I don't want it to overpower the other two colors. But I try to get it at least a little bit on all the brown bits of him. And that is the last paint step that we're going to do on this guy. So I let this completely dry, because the next step is going to involve some sort of roughness to the miniature, and I don't want any of the paint coming off while we're doing that. So this I probably let sit for probably an hour before I moved on to the next step, just to make sure that everything was nice and set and wasn't going to have any problems with that. But we'll come back and do that next step in just a second. All right, so for this step, we're going to use some of this stuff, turquoise green pigment powder. It says turquoise green. It's pretty much just blue. Maybe, in terms of true artistic color, maybe it does count as green, but for me, it was perfectly blue. And this I'm just going to use to kind of give us a glow sort of effect. I'm going to work it in to all the areas around where he comes in contact with the ground here. And then I even work it in like some around his mouth and in his back scales and even on his chest a little bit. And this is just kind of an easier way to, at least I find it to be an easier way to get a glow effect. When you don't need your glow effect to be super obvious. I just want a couple little hints of it. I don't want it to be like crazy OSL level of glow. This stuff is widely available. This non-toxic pigment powder, you can get it pretty much anywhere, Amazon or at a craft store. I just had this brand on hand, so there's nothing specific about this brand. You just want to make sure that it says non-toxic on it. I'm sure there are probably some high-quality artist pigments that are made with some pretty scary stuff, so I always go for the non-toxic stuff. But I just put this all around him, like I said, and then I focused a lot of it here, as you can see, on the rock that his hand is under, because we're going to come in the next step and use just a little bit of blue shade to kind of accentuate that around his hand, like he's gripping it and almost melting the rock with his with the heat that's in his hand. Between this step and the next step, which you won't see on camera, I sprayed him down with some matte sealant just to lock that pigment powder in place. You don't want it like getting all over the place when you're moving your models around or anything. And if you don't, you either have to work it in really well to the miniature, or you need to spray it with something to get it to lock in there. So once I finish this, and once I've let the matte sealant dry, we'll come back and do the last step. All right, so our final step here is going to be a two-step process. And first, we're going to put some of this Tyrian blue shade down from Citadel or Games Workshop. And that's going to be the base of our accentuated glow that we're going to put on this rock. Like I said before, I don't want a crazy full-on OSL effect. I just want a subtle hint of a glow around this rock where his hand is gripping it and, in my imagination, is melting it. So once that's on and it's still wet, we're then going to, very importantly, get a different brush, because if you dip a wet brush in pigment powder, terrible things will happen. A different brush, and get some of this pigment powder and work it in to that wet shade. And this will sort of mix together and make a sort of a thick wash, I guess you could say. And as you can see, it's giving us a nice subtle OSL effect there. And then I do this same process, a little bit of the shade and then the powder in his mouth, just to kind of play up that idea that the internal body temperature is the hottest. And then painted the base rim, and that's about it. As you can see here, he is all done and in his final state. This was painted for somebody else, and they're going to base it with the rest of their army. So the base is kind of basic here. But this is as far as I needed to take it today. Hopefully, even though I don't think I achieved my blue fire look, hopefully you at least learned something. Maybe even if it was something to not do. But regardless, maybe you learned something. Thank you everybody for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the next one.